Hi, good afternoon and welcome. You're watching MF Corner. I am Sumaira Abidi. Today on the show, two topics which will be very, very relevant for all retail investors. The first, of course, is why we shouldn't be chasing past returns of mutual fund schemes. Ashish Shanker of Motilal Oswal Private Wealth will join in. And a little later on the show, we've seen a lot of NFOs all of last year and then again this year. And investors, there's this increasing trend to redeem from current investments to invest in an NFO just because it's an NFO. Is that the right way to go about it? We'll have Amit Bilwalkar of Sapient Wealth joining in a little later. But first, let's talk about the past returns of mutual funds and why you shouldn't be chasing it. So Ashish Shanker, MD and CEO of Motilal Oswal Private Wealth, joins in. Ashish, good afternoon. And even though there is this deluge of investor education that a lot of people are now doing, and information is virtually available to anybody, right? Yet we have people asking to recommend schemes without any thought to asset allocation, just the best performing schemes of the moment. Why is that so wrong?
Yeah, so Sumaira, first of all, it's always a pleasure to be on your show. Yes, you're right. In absence of enough awareness or education, I think the easiest way for most investors to select funds is to look at last 1 year and 3 year performance. However, I can tell you that 70 to 80% of these decisions which are made on past performance will end up in disappointment. And this is backed up by data. We update this data every quarter, in fact. So if you look at the top 25 schemes which are ranked at the top in terms of performance last 3 years, invariably these schemes never end up being in the top 25 in the next 3 years. So, my recommendation to investors is to look beyond performance. Don't just chase performance. Don't look at only last 3 years performance data. Look at the mandate of the scheme. Look at the track record of the fund manager. There are a few other things that you can check before you make your investment decision.
Okay, so let me just read out, in fact, some of the data which Ashish has presented. He says if you look at the 3-year CAGR, the best performing fund between 2015 to 2017 was ranked 132 3 years later in 2017 and 19. The best performing fund between 2014 to 16 was ranked 223 3 years later. So, just goes to show that chasing what is the flavor of the moment may not always be that case. Ashish, we'll get to asset allocation in just a bit, but I want to ask you that why is it that the best performers lag behind and so consistently?
See, there's a very common metric in financial markets, which is reversion to mean. So what happens is that there is a particular portfolio which does extremely well, let's say for 1 year, that 1 year return spills over into 3 years, and that 3 years spills over into 5 years. Now, invariably, we have seen that investors, not just in India, but globally chase performance. So a lot of money comes in when the fund manager is at his peak performance. So money chases returns, but what happens is markets tend to mean revert. So the stocks which were best performing over the last 3-4 years then tend to underperform, and that invariably results into the underperformance of the scheme. Now, the top 25, like you showed, the data is very, very stark. Invariably, the top 25 performers become bottom performers. But even if you, let's say, normalize this data and look at quartile ranks, right? Let's say the top 25% of the schemes, 70% of the top 25% of the schemes in any 3-year period tend to underperform in the subsequent 3 years. And this can be explained by a concept called mean reversion. And hence, just looking at near-term performance can lead to accidents, is what we tell investors.
In fact, Ashish, I was looking at your 20-year data also from 2000 to 2020, which says that only 1/3 of the top 25% funds remain top performers on both 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year basis. So, how does one select a fund? I mean, I do understand the principle that past returns cannot be replicated, right? In that sense, I mean, if I'm holding a scheme which has performed well, do I necessarily need to change that scheme because going forward it probably is going to become a dud? Or if I want to even select a new scheme, what do I base that decision on?
So there are three things. One is it is imperative to look at the longer term performance and track record of the fund and the fund manager. So don't rely only on 3-year data, look at 5-year, 10-year data. If you consult any financial advisor, he can also show you something called rolling returns, because rolling returns show you how consistently the fund manager has performed. So that's point number one on the performance side. Second, when you're constructing a portfolio, right, you need to choose 3 or 4 fund managers who have different styles and approaches of investing. I mean, we have this fund manager selection framework called 4C, where we look at different styles of investing. So there are fund managers who tend to invest their portfolio based on the value philosophy, where they try to buy stocks which are undervalued. Similarly, there are fund managers who chase growth. So as an investor, you have the choice of buying into 4 or 5 fund managers with track record with varying styles. The third very important thing, Sumaira, is after doing all of this, you need to set your expectations realistically. So for example, you can't expect, let's say if you have four or 5 funds in your portfolio, you can't expect all 4 fund managers or 5 fund managers to outperform all the time, right? In your portfolio, if you have 4 funds, there will be one fund manager who may not necessarily be outperforming in the last 3 or 4 years. Now, if he's stuck to his mandate and if he's stuck to his style, then you must give the fund manager a longer rope and continue with that investing, because otherwise what will happen is, and this is what we've invariably seen, that people tend to sell out of a underperforming fund just because the last 3 years have not been great for the fund manager, and they then go into a fund where the fund manager has done extraordinarily well last 3 years. Both are wrong decisions, because the fund manager who's not done well last 3 years, in all probability will do reasonably well in the next 3 years, and vice versa. So I think setting expectations and ensuring that you don't expect all your fund managers, if you've kind of given money to fund managers across different styles of investing, you don't expect them to outperform all the time. This is extremely important. It's important to stay through an entire cycle or a journey. Yes, if fundamentally, let's say the fund manager has changed and the style of investing has changed, it doesn't agree with you, or there is very, very high continued underperformance, then definitely there is reason to take a decision. But otherwise, I would say that on a portfolio where you have 4 or 5 funds, it's good to let these funds run if you've done your decision based on some analysis like I explained.
Okay, and which is why I guess it's important to have different styles of fund management in your portfolio, so that one part of your portfolio is always performing, right? Now let's come to asset allocation, because we've established that just selecting schemes randomly and adding them to make a collection of schemes is not the way to go. You must have a proper decided asset allocation, which is the only way your portfolio can consistently perform, right? But even within that, Ashish, I mean, look at the case of gold, right? Last year we saw a 30% rally. This year the returns so far are negative, and it's across asset classes because it varies so much. So how does one decide the allocation, and do you keep changing it annually?
Yeah, so look, first of all, one needs to identify what is the purpose of an asset class in the portfolio. So according to me, there are 4 types of asset classes. One, there is a growth asset class. These are asset classes which tend to handsomely beat inflation and grow your purchasing power over time. Typically, Indian equities or US equities would fall in this category, right? Second, you have asset classes which can generate regular income. So these are asset classes where you would want to remove some part of your portfolio every year, either for your expenses or for certain other goals that you want to meet. Then you have the liquidity part of the portfolio, which you should strictly be in a savings account or cash funds. And the last part of the portfolio, I call it the insurance part of the portfolio, right? So that's the part of the portfolio which normally does well in crises, or if there is any untoward incident that hits markets, and gives you liquidity to rebalance across your growth asset classes. So broadly, these are the asset classes that you can invest into. Now, what we have observed, Sumaira, over time is that asset class performances also keep rotating. So like you rightly said, last year gold did extremely well. But remember, last year was also a crisis year where we had the pandemic hitting global markets. Similarly, if you go back all the way to 2008, again, gold was the top performing asset class because you had the subprime meltdown. Otherwise, what happens is that Indian equities or US equities tend to perform when the economic outlook is extremely good. In the longer run, both these asset classes deliver much higher returns, but they come with a lot of volatility, right? The income asset class is fixed income, where you get a constant growth based on what are the interest rates prevailing at that point in time. So a portfolio constructed across these four asset classes should be the foundation for any investor. Now, depending on your age or the time you have to utilize your corpus, you can decide how aggressive you want to be. What we have seen is once you've allocated, so let's say we have this strategy that we run for clients where we allocate equally across these asset classes, the four asset classes that I just mentioned, and we rebalance this portfolio every year. Now, we have found that once a year rebalancing helps bring down volatility, and it also gives you a smoother ride. In fact, right, if you see the strategy, the rebalancing every year, it does not produce negative returns on a 3-year rolling basis. I mean, this we have observed over 30 years. So it works for most investors who are conservative, and at the same time, it has the ability to deliver more than debt returns. In fact, most of the time it delivers double-digit returns.
Understood. Understood. Ashish, thank you very much. This is a very large topic, but we have touched upon the, just the highlights today to give retail investors a sense that, just randomly putting schemes into your portfolio doesn't work. It has to be a very planned and concerted effort to ensure that your portfolio works as a whole and not just a sum of parts. Ashish, thank you very, very much for joining in. Okay, with that, we're going to take a very quick break. On the other side, Sapient Wealth's Amit Biwalkar will join in to tell us how to approach NFOs. I mean, do you invest in NFOs because they are cheap? Do you redeem your investments to invest in NFOs? Do you invest in NFOs at all? Which is the way to go about it? We'll be right back with Amit to talk about that. Stay tuned.